I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Charles Moss Duke Jr., born in Charlotte, North Carolina, graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, joined the United States Air Force out of the Naval Academy. His first plane was the F-86 Sabre fighter. It's the plane that is in Cleveland Park, honoring Major Anderson. He wound up with much more advanced fighter planes, including the F-101 and one of my favorite planes, the F-104 Starfighter, which I've read could go up as high as 90,000 feet. You can see the curvature of the Earth. But later in his Air Force career, he volunteered for NASA and was chosen and became part of a class of, I think, 19 astronauts. And as part of those duties after his training, when we began the lunar missions, he was chosen to be CAPCOM, the capsule communicator, in Houston, talking to them. And you have all heard his voice before, every one of you, because when they landed and Neil Armstrong said, "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed," a voice said, "Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot." That was him. So a voice, only Winston Churchill has been heard by more people than Charlie Duke. So that's another one of his records. So after being CAPCOM, he was selected to go on Apollo 16. There were 17 Apollo missions. And so he went on the second to the last one. It was a mission that was between April 16th and 27, 1972, that actually landed on April the 21st and came back on April the 24th, took off from the moon. He became the 10th person of 12 to walk on the surface of the moon. He stayed on the surface 71 hours and 14 minutes. They had 3 excursions onto the surface, during which he logged 20 hours and 15 minutes in activities outside, collected 213 pounds of rock. Now he's retired, so if you're building a rock garden, you know, he needs something to do. He might need the extra money. He's on a fixed income. So if you need any rock work done at your house, I got a prospect for you. He also collected soil samples. He was the youngest person to ever land on the moon, having landed at 36. And, as a matter of fact, he remains the youngest person to have ever landed on the moon. He's got a lot of stories to tell. I hope he'll tell you about the family photo that he left on the moon. And for those in that family, I would tell them, I'd have a safe space here on Earth, because it occurs to me that if the aliens invade and land on the moon to have coffee before landing here on Earth, they might say, "This must be an important person." They may go on and look for them. So tell them to be ready to hide. Also, I hope you'll tell the story of the country music tape, which I think is a great story. He retired as a brigadier general. He had 4,147 hours of flying time, which includes 265 hours flying in space. I think it's interesting that they give you credit. I think that also includes his time on the moon. And I thought, well, he wasn't flying, he was sitting on the moon, but the moon was flying around the Earth, so I guess that counts. So General Duke, if you'll please come up and join us. We're proud to have you, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction. Mayor White, welcome. It's good to see you again. Ladies and gentlemen, relatives, cousins, friends here in Greenville. My wife Dotty and I are delighted to be here, and moved here about a little over a year ago We've been in Texas since 1966, and it was tough to move, but Lord said move, so we moved. And so here we are. We're just delighted to be here and see friends and make old friends and make new friends, and also have a chance to meet a lot of my relatives. My grandmother on my daddy's side was one of 16 kids by the same mama, and they almost all of them made it to adulthood. So all the upstate's cousins and of some sort. And so we're delighted to be here. Our son Charles lives here. One of the reasons we came back, and Sterling, our granddaughter, is one of his kids, and we have wonderful relationships with all of our grandkids. And it's just a delight to be here. Thank y'all for coming out and listen to these stories that happened a long time ago. You heard my twin brother Bill and I were born in Charlotte, but that was because it was the nearest hospital to where my parents were living back then in Pageland. And so, but we grew up in South Carolina, and after World War II, we moved back to Lancaster, and we were in, I think, let's see, it'd be 1946, so we're 11 years old. I can remember Pearl Harbor, coming back from church on Sunday afternoon and listening to President Roosevelt talk about the dastardly deed that Japanese pulled on us in Pearl Harbor. So I had a lot of memories. My heroes were the greatest generation, those who fought and served and died in World War II. And so I decided I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. My dad had been in the Navy during World War II, and so but I couldn't get into the Naval Academy from Lancaster High School. So my folks sent me off to Admiral Farragut Academy in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I graduated in 1953. It turned out Admiral Farragut Academy has a distinction of being the only school that has 2 graduates from there that landed on the moon. Myself and Alan Shepard was a graduate of Farragut. Anyway, I got to the Naval Academy and fell in love with airplanes. And I didn't even know you could go into the Air Force from the Naval Academy. And but that was a possibility back then because there was no Air Force Academy. And so I had a debate in my mind about naval aviation or Air Force. And that decision was made by me, for me, by a doctor at the Naval Academy. He said, Midshipman Duke, you got astigmatism in your right eye, and you don't qualify for naval aviation, but the Air Force will take you. And so guess what? I said, yes, sir, and I went into the Air Force and never regretted that decision. It was a tremendous career for me. I had 29 years active in reserve in my career, and served as my first assignment out to flight school was a fighter interceptor pilot in Ramstein, Germany, and I went there in the spring of 1959. And while I was in flight school at Spence Air Base in Moultrie, Georgia, I had soloed on the on my birthday. The next day, Sputnik went up. So it was the beginning of the space race. The first satellite, the Russians had beat us into space, and it was to me a very tragic event that those guys beat us. And anyway, it started the space race. And 2 years later, I'm going to Germany as a fighter pilot, as I said, and they picked the first group of astronauts, and NASA was formed, and so we were on the road to hopefully victory in the space race. Well, it turned out 2 years later, in April of 1961, Yuri Gagarin, the Russian cosmonaut, orbited the Earth, and that was in April. And it stunned everybody, to me. I couldn't believe it. And anyway, a couple of weeks later, Alan Shepard went up as the first American in space, up and down on a suborbital flight. And so we were at least we were in the running. And 2 weeks later, President Kennedy announced that we were going to land on the moon by the end of 1969, and we we're going to return safely. Astronaut liked that part. And so I laughed at him. I said, we got 15 minutes in space, and back in those days, rocket launches were 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Uh-oh, blow up instead of lift off. And so it wasn't very reliable mode of transportation. And so, but the amazing thing about it was 8 years and 2 months later, I'm sitting in Mission Control talking to Neil Armstrong when he landed on the moon. America did it, and I don't know, some of you in here might not believe we landed on the moon. But let me tell you, we really did land on the moon. If we faked it, why did we fake it 9 times? Well, 6 landings and 3 other flights to the moon. Well, the evidence is overwhelming that we did land on the moon. And you can see the pictures that are now taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. And on our landing site, you can see our descent stage, you can see our little car, and you can see the experiments packages. So the evidence is overwhelming that we landed on the moon. And if you want any more argument about that, just come see me after this is over, and I think I can convince you that we really did land on the moon. So I was at MIT when 2 years later, a year later, I'm at MIT. And this is for the young people in the, I want you to just listen, keep your antennas up. You never know what's going to happen in your life, so prepare. And maybe you think you're going to go this way, but you go this way. And so I had a decision to make in 1962 to go back to MIT and a graduate school, leave my great assignment in Germany, or I could stay in Germany for another year. If I'd have stayed in Germany for another year, I'd have never been an astronaut. That's how important that decision was in my life. So I went off to MIT, and while I was, after the first summer school, I was flunking out. That was the hardest 2 years of my life, was going back to school at MIT. And MIT doesn't test you on what you learn in class, it'll test you how you apply what you learn in class. And that's a big difference. And I sat in exams at MIT where the class average was 8 out of 100. And if you got an 8, you got an A. And so it was humiliating, really. I mean, golly. Well, what saved me was MIT had the contract to build the Apollo guidance and navigation system. And so they built this system, but they didn't know whether anybody could work it or not. So they needed some fighter pilots to test it out or to try it out. So I signed up for that. And while I was there doing this work in that senior year, second year, I should say, I met some astronauts. I'd never met anybody that was so gung-ho and so excited about a job as these guys. And I said, how did I get that job? And they said, well, you got to get your degree, go to test pilot school, and you might have a chance. Well, that sounded like pretty good advice, and I followed their advice. While I was my first semester at the summer of '62, four of us bachelors were moving out of the senior dorm or whatever it was. It was wasn't a very nice place to stay, so we had rented an apartment, and I went over to visit the girls who was living. They were going to move out, and there's a young lady named Dotty Claiborne there visiting her, visiting everybody. So she didn't want to come out. She'd been looking at the job all day, but I outwaited her, and she came out for a little visit. And we met, and that the next day I drove home to South Carolina. I said, Mama, I've met the woman I'm going to marry. And we did, about 8 months later, I guess it was. And now we're coming up this June, 61 years. And so she's here, and she wrote the book that it's got my name on it, but it's I told the stories and she wrote the book from the stories. I'm a storyteller, not a book writer. I can't type. The biggest mistake I made in my life was not learning how to type. It's a true story, true point. Anyway, we got to Edwards in test pilot school. I graduated in the summer of '65, and went to work for famous American test pilot Chuck Yeager, who was commandant of the test pilot school. And so 2 months later, this was in September of '65, NASA had another call for astronauts. So I applied and was selected. And so we moved to Houston in the spring of 1966, and I started my career as an astronaut. We had a tough time during those years. From 65 until 71, I guess it was, we had 8 fatalities in the astronaut office. We had 4 killed in plane crashes. We had 3 killed in a fire at Kennedy Space Center in Apollo 1, and we had 1 guy killed in an automobile accident. So of the 50-something astronauts that had been selected up until that time, we were down to in the 40s. And John Glenn had retired, and Scott Carpenter, some of the original guys. So we sort of bubbled up into this mix of training. And we were started getting assigned to flight crews. And my first assignment was a support crew for Apollo 10. And I was in mission. Apollo 10 was a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11, the first landing. This was like May of 1969. And so I was the Capcom, and we took the lunar module to the moon, and we started a descent, but it couldn't land, so they aborted and came back up. So except for a landing, it was a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11. So that went really well, and Neil Armstrong called me up and said, Charlie, would you do Capcom for us on Apollo 11? And I said, you bet, I'd love to. That was going to be a great honor, I thought. And so we trained for 2 months, and we pulled it off. We had a lot of problems on descent. And we had communication problems. Then we had computer overloads, and 1201 alarm and 1202 alarm. I thought we were dead in the water when I saw these alarms, but the mission control team knew what to do. And they said, we'll go on those alarms. The Apollo computer, listen to this, the Apollo computer had 80K memory. You look at your cell phone, 60 gigabytes or whatever. I don't know what a gigabyte is, but it was, in other words, my cell phone's got 800,000 times the Apollo computer memory. So we're all enjoying the spillover of technology from Apollo and the space program. Anyway, so the computer program, then we had a trajectory program problem, and then we had a fuel problem. So I called to Eagle, that was their call sign, Eagle 60 seconds, and they weren't on the ground. They had 60 seconds to land or we were going to call an abort. And then I called Eagle 30 seconds, and they weren't on the ground. 14 seconds later, I heard Buzz Aldrin say, "Contact, engine stop," and they're on the ground. A great sigh of relief in mission control, as you can imagine. The tension in me in mission control on that flight was higher than it was when I landed on the moon in 1972. It was just tremendous tension. Are we going to do it? Are we going to do it? And so we did it. And then Neil, as you heard, Neil said, "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle is landed." And I said, "Roger, twang." Wait a minute, that's not right. Tranquility, we copy on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Well, in all of Apollo mission control saved the day just about on every mission. They saved our landing. Later on, I went to backup crew for Apollo 13, and then John Young and I were chosen to be the prime crew for Apollo 16 and to be able to land. Is this thing working? Yes. Okay. Was scheduled to land, and we were going to be originally the first crew to have a long duration stay on the moon. By that I mean 3 days, but they moved it up one, and so Apollo 15 was the first for that, and we were the second with the use of a little car called the lunar rover. And it was a tremendous revolution of training. I mean, in exploration on the moon, because prior to the rover, you had to walk everywhere. And down here with all of my equipment on, in my spacesuit, I weighed 363 pounds. And big backpack, you had to walk like this, or you're going to fall over to get your CG. But it was just up on the moon only 60 pounds. We had a car, the rover, that down here weighed 400 and, about 400 pounds. Up there it weighed a little over 80 pounds. And so if you didn't like your parking place up on the moon, you just picked it up and walked off with your car. A tremendous time. I felt right at home on the moon. There wasn't any sense of fear or danger. It was just beautiful. Gray rolling terrain. We landed almost in the middle of the moon, so it's almost a full moon tonight. So if you look at the bright area in the middle of the moon, that's where we landed. And it was called the Descartes Highlands. It was 8,000 feet above where Neil Armstrong landed in the Mare Tranquillitatis. And so it was totally different terrains and totally different rock. And but we had been trained for all of this, and it was just really exciting and wonder. People ask me, "What did you feel like landing on the moon?" I was in awe, wonder, thrilled, excited, adventure. You know, all of these emotions that you have. I'm on the moon. I'm on the moon. You can hardly believe it. I'm on the moon. You recognize this crater over here and the one over there, and so we had the little car, as I said, and that was to drive us across the moon. John was the driver. John Young was the commander. So he drove and I navigated, and so I had a set of maps, and if you land where you're supposed to land, the maps were good. So. And so we had a pretty good set of maps because we landed within 200 yards of where we were supposed to land. And John picked out a great spot. We landed, and we were upright. And we just screamed, "We're on the moon." By the way, we were 6 hours late landing. It was the last revolution that we could land and still make our landing spot. So mission control, again, saved the day. and gave us a go for landing 6 hours behind schedule when we landed. So we were excited, of course, and we were supposed to go out for expedition right after landing, but they said, well, you've been up too long, 6-hour delay. We're going to change the flight plan and you're going to go to sleep. So take off your spacesuit and go to sleep. Now, can you imagine 4 hours after landing on the moon, somebody says, go to sleep? And man, I was wide-eyed like this and describing every rock out the window. And anyway, we had to take our suits off. And finally, I had to call them up and say, Houston, I'm not getting any sleep. I'm taking a sleeping pill. So this little sleeping pill gave me about 4 hours. And then we got suited up. By the way, it took 3 hours to get suited up, to get your suit on and everything checked out before you opened the door. The hatch to open the door was between, right underneath the instrument panel and the computer. And so when you opened the door, it swung this way. So I'm trapped behind the door, and the commander gets out first. So Neil Armstrong's first on the moon because he was on that side. And he gets out, and Buzz Aldrin gets out, and that's the whole routine during the 6 landings that we had on the moon. We were the 5th landing, and the only one in the mountains of the moon. It was spectacular. People say to me, he says, well, what did the Earth look like from the moon? I said, I can't tell you. Where we landed, the Earth was right overhead, and it stays there. It never moves. And so I look up, and I'm looking at the top of my helmet. The only time I saw the Earth from the moon was when I was set the high jump record on the moon, and at the end of our stay, and I'm bouncing, and I gave a big jump, and when I did, I straightened up, and the center of gravity went over, and I went back like this. And that's the only time I had fear in the whole mission. And fear is not a bad emotion if you don't panic. If you panic, you're dead. So I had this thought, roll right, and I rolled to the right and broke my fall and bounced onto my back. Now I'm on the back, my heart's pounding, but I'm still alive. And there's the Earth right out in front of me now, and I can see this beautiful Earth. And John Young comes over, the commander said, look down, says, Charlie, that wasn't very smart. Help me up, John. So he helped me up. And mission control, Dotty was in mission control in the viewing area, and she'll tell you, said they were very upset with the Moon Olympics. And, so that ended our Moon Olympics, and to this day, John and I own the high jump record on the moon. Another one of my claims to fame. Well, we didn't want to come back, but it's time to come, and so we returned, and Heroes Welcome, and did a big parade in Lancaster. I was, by the way, South Carolina's first astronaut, and first into that. And I was proud to represent my state and our country in Apollo. I remember we got 100 tickets each for the launch. And so, I mean, that's first cousins, much less everybody else in the state. So we sort of cheated a little bit, and then we kept inviting people. And before liftoff, we were in quarantine, and Dotty was listening to the radio or something with the family, and the reporter was saying, well, there are a lot of people here. There's a South Carolina car. Oh, there's another South Carolina car. I think half the state showed up. The governor came, and just a lot of people. And I really appreciate all of y'all in here old enough to remember what that was like and to cheer us on to success and to victory in Apollo. Well, it was after Apollo, I was backup crew. The last assignment was a backup crew for Apollo 17, and that was the last one. It was a dead-end job, but John said, "Well, why we want to do this? There's no flight after." I said, "John, we're backup crew. Remember, if they break a leg, we get to go again." And I talked him into it, but they stayed healthy, and thankfully, and so there were 12 of us on the moon. Four still left alive. I'm the youngest, and I'll be 89 next October. So we're all moving on, and but as long as I can share this story and inspire kids all over the country, I'll be pleased to do it. Dotty and I moved here, as I said, about a year and a half ago, and we prayed a lot about it, as I said, and the Lord said move, and so here we are, and we're delighted to be amongst friends and relatives and folks that we love here in Greenville, and especially a lot of family, and so thank you all for coming, and I appreciate it very much, and delighted that we'll have a chance to visit and get to know one another as the Lord willing. Anybody got a question that they'd like to ask? We got a few minutes. I think we're supposed to be finished here, but if you got to leave, you can leave. But if you want to ask a question, and I'll see if I can answer it.
Tammy has a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you so much for your service. In the movies, you always see the re-entry into the Earth is just the most dramatic thing. What was it like on re-entry?
A good question. Re-entry, in the movies, they make it really spectacular, and it was spectacular. You hit the Earth's atmosphere in Apollo at about 26,000 miles an hour. And so you're coming in going this way, but you're looking that way, and all of a sudden you start seeing these little like flash bulbs going off outside. So you get into the atmosphere, upper atmosphere, and then the G level builds up really quick, and you come plunging in. Then it's an instant fireball around the spacecraft. It's like being inside of a furnace, but it's cool inside, but 5,000 degrees outside. And Apollo had no wings, but it had lift because the center of gravity was not at the center of the heat shield. So you came in with lift vector up, like an airplane. And when you hit the atmosphere, it dug in and wanted to come back out again. And that was called skip out. If you allowed that to happen, you were gone. You weren't going to make it. So anyway, as it started back out, the autopilot rolled it over 180 degrees, and now you got, we call it a split S in flying, and it pulled you back into the atmosphere. And the fireball lasted a couple of minutes, and the maximum G level was 7 deceleration, but you were comfortable inside, and it's like being inside of a furnace, and it was spectacular. And as you rolled around, you could see the blackness of space. As it rolled this way, you could see the ocean. And then the fireball went out about over 100,000 feet, I guess. And so now we're coming straight down, and Mattingly's counting, Ken Mattingly, the command module pilot's counting altitude. And I had a window out on my right side, and we're strapped in, but I could lean up and look out this window, and as a helicopter flies by, and we know we're close, they got us visually, and so I'm looking out, and Mattingly's is 600 feet, 500 feet. Well, when he gets to 100 feet, I'm going to put my head back because it's going to be a pretty good crash, and at 100 feet, we hit the water. And my head went whomp like that. And I was seeing stars, and I had an important job. After we hit the water, I had to punch a circuit breaker in by my right knee so he could jettison the parachutes on his side. And so I didn't get that in soon enough, so one of the parachutes stayed inflated and we pulled us over. Now we're floating upside down. And it's stable, but the hatch is underwater, so you can't get out. So we pumped up some big balloons, and it flipped us back over, and then the Navy came and knocked on the door and says, we're ready to get you out. And so we didn't have to go into quarantine like the first flights. There were no moon bugs. And so we didn't go into quarantine. So we just got back on the carrier and got showered up. And 11 days in a spacecraft with no showers is, you can imagine. So anyway, next question before we, anybody got enough? Okay.
What is the high jump record on the moon?
The high jump record, I think it was about 4 feet. You know, I only weighed 80 pounds, 80 pounds up there. But it was, you couldn't do much springing. It was the suit that had some little, you could bend your knee a little bit, but you couldn't bend at the waist at all. So you had to sort of arch over like this. Anyway, we sprang, and if you look at the TV camera was on the front of the car, and I jump and I go over and you could see almost all of me going over. And so it wasn't. They were really upset, to say the least. And one of the things that really was important for me was right at the end of our stay, I took a picture of my family that we'd taken in the backyard. It was a little snapshot, and I had it in my pocket of my suit, and I pulled it out and dropped it on the moon, and took a picture of the picture. And it's the only family picture that was on the moon. Now, the temperature on the moon at that point, the surface was 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you can imagine a little photograph wasn't going to last very long. So it started curling up almost instantly, but before it did, I got the picture of the picture, and so it's a very iconic picture. It's the only family picture that was left on the moon. Still there, but it's a shredded all the black little thing now. You know, with the solar radiation, the flags are probably all faded out. They're probably all white now, and so the objects that are colorful there are the mylar material that was gold on the outside of the spacecraft, and that won't fade. But most of the things, the materials, will fade out after so much radiation. Yes, sir.
Have you seen any of the SpaceX launches, and how do you feel about the prospects for Mars?
I have seen the SpaceX launches, and I'm very excited about commercialization of space. SpaceX, Blue Origin, they're doing a great job. At first I was very skeptical of their involvement and why is NASA spending money supporting these guys, but they were outstanding, and they've contributed so much to space exploration. They've gotten so good, I believe that NASA's going to abandon near Earth and leave that for the commercial side, and that we're going to focus on the moon and beyond. Right now, Artemis is what NASA's focusing on as far as returning to the moon. Probably first landing would probably be late this decade with Artemis 3. They've got a crew of 4, and they will land in the South Pole region of the moon, which is going to be a very, very difficult mission because the South Pole region of the moon is very rough, and the reason they picked that because if there's any water on the moon, it's in the form of ice down there, and where we landed there was no possibility of any kind of moisture, but down there could be some, so that was why it's selected. I'm not a big fan of manned missions to Mars. I think technology's gotten so good then we can land robots on Mars, and we can fly airplanes on Mars, drones and stuff like that. And the technology is so good that risking a crew to Mars is, I don't think is worth it, but that's a personal opinion. It's planning to Mars is you launch from Earth orbit and you're on your way and you don't have any help. Hey, Houston, the widget broke. Too bad. You got to fix. If you can't fix it, you rat out that system. And do you have a doctor on board? Do you perform surgery? How do you pick a crew? I mean, all of these things are big decisions that Mars will cause, because once you leave, you're basically on your own. You can talk, but unless you've got something that is on there, a printer, that can make stuff, 3D printing or something, you can be in trouble in a hurry. So we'll see. I hope I'm still here for the first landing on the moon and give up the youngest person on the moon. Any other questions before we? Yes, sir. We worked very hard as backup crew to get them back safely. Mission Control, if I hadn't already said it, they're the unsung heroes of Apollo. They saved the day on every flight, and failure was not an option on that flight. We had to get them back, and so we had to develop procedures that would cause a spacecraft that was built for 2 guys for 3 days. Now we got 3 guys for 4 days. How do you make it last? I mean, you got drinking. We only have so much drinking water. You only have so much battery power. You have so much scrubbing of oxygen systems, and so there was a lot of things that we had to figure out. We had to do it quick to make sure that we're going to save enough stuff. And sure enough, Mission Control, I didn't think we were going to make it personally. For the first 30 hours, it looked like stuff was running out 10 hours before we got back. But we got smarter and smarter and smarter, and we were going to have enough. I changed my mind about 30 hours before we got back, and I said, if we don't make a mistake in Mission Control, and they don't make a mistake on the spacecraft, we got enough stuff to get back. And sure enough, nobody made any mistakes, and we had a successful recovery. But it was a big job that they had on board and Mission Control to work together to get the procedures and the systems cycled on and off to make sure everything was going to be okay. So that was a crowning glory, I think, of Apollo as far as the interface between Mission Control and this crew. My favorite part, going to the moon, was landing. I mean, the whole purpose was to land on the moon, and if you didn't land on the moon, the mission was a failure. But you could have still come back safely without landing. But I mean, we were in orbit, and I could look down, and there was my landing spot 8 miles beneath me, and I could see it, and they were about to tell me to come home. So that would have been a very bitter pill to swallow. Thankfully, Mission Control solved it all, and we landed the last revolution that we could have landed and still had enough fuel to get over to that landing site. So landing on the moon was by far the biggest thrill. One more question, and then we'll. How deep is the dust? The original thoughts were if the universe is 3 billion years old or whatever it is, there's going to be 3,000 foot of dust on the moon and you're going to sink out of sight. That was a big argument. So, well, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. So, so we sent a surveyor, an unmanned spacecraft, to test it. How deep was the dust? And we landed a surveyor. They turned on the camera, and there was a thing sitting up on the top. It wasn't even into the footpad, barely made a dent. And so that proved that we were going to land. And so the footpad of the lunar lander was the same bearing strength as the footpad for the rover, the surveyor. So we knew we were going to be okay. So the moon is covered with dust, very, very fine, like sand, finer than sand, dust, but it's pulverized rock. And what happens is that it interlocks, so it supports a lot of bearing strength. But when I started to shovel, I could shovel down as deep as I could shovel, and it was still dust. So there was a lot of dust, but it compacted, and you never sank in more than about an inch. Our deepest footprint I made was probably maybe 2 inches. By the way, you never got lost on the moon, because everywhere you went, you left your tracks. Where am I? You said, follow your tracks. So you just turn around and follow your tracks back. So we drove, our car, we drove a total of 17 miles. Apollo 17 and Apollo 16 set the moon speed record, by the way. 17 miles an hour. And in that car, it was bouncing coming down the hill, I tell you. And we had our seatbelts on, and glad I did. So I drilled a hole into the moon 10 feet deep and jacked it all back out. We brought that back, and it was still dust 10 feet at that spot. So there was a lot of dust, but it had a bearing strength that was really strong, and so you didn't worry about sinking out of sight. Okay, thank you very much for being here.
Take care of me just 1 second. Charlie, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Dotty also for both of your service to America, because it's been a joint job for both of you, and you've acquitted yourself so well. You brought honor to our country, and I want to thank you for your past service, but also for your present service, because you're going around the country giving this inspirational talk, talking to the young people and all the things that you do, selling the books, selling the CDs, and that's continuing service to our country. So we thank you for being with us. Thank you. And Dotty and Stir the Whirl are going to be up here selling books and DVDs. Goes to a good cause. Come up and get some books. Thank you.